Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 25th June 2024 and today we have few important and most relevant news articles for our discussion. Without any delay, let's start our discussion. So before discussing them, yesterday I have given one practice question for all of you. So the question was, Caspian Sea is bordered by how many of these countries, or which of these countries that are given here in these options share their borders with the Caspian Sea? Now when you look into these options, right, so before actually addressing this question or answering this question, we need to look into the map of Caspian Sea. Now this is where the Caspian Sea is located. It is located in Central Asia, and Caspian Sea is bordered by countries like Iran. So Iran shares its borders with Caspian Sea. Turkmenistan also shares its borders with Caspian Sea, but understand that Uzbekistan don't share its border with Caspian Sea. And apart from that, Afghanistan is also not sharing its borders with the Caspian Sea, and Kazakhstan also have its border with Caspian Sea, followed by Russia and then Azerbaijan and then Iran. So these are the countries which have been sharing their borders with the Caspian Sea in Central Asia. And the other thing that we need to understand, Armenia and Georgia also not sharing their borders with Caspian Sea, but on the other hand, Georgia share its borders with the Black Sea. Now if you go into the options, Russia, obviously Russia sharing its borders with the Caspian Sea. Kazakhstan also have its border, but I've told you that Afghanistan is not sharing its border, and even Azerbaijan also sharing its borders with the Caspian Sea. So therefore this is incorrect answer. Second option, Russia, yes, Kazakhstan shares its borders, but Uzbekistan don't share its borders with the Caspian Sea. So therefore this is also incorrect answer. But on the other hand, Iran shares its border with Caspian Sea. Third option, Russia, yes, Russia shares its borders, Kazakhstan shares its borders, Turkmenistan and Iran. So these countries sharing their borders with the Caspian Sea. Now we'll look into the fourth option also. So Russia sharing its borders, Kazakhstan sharing its borders, but Afghanistan is not sharing its border with the Caspian Sea. And the correct answer for this question is option C, Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Iran. Now apart from Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Iran, Azerbaijan is also sharing its borders with the Caspian Sea. I hope you understood this, right? So the countries which have been sharing its borders with the Caspian Sea are 5 different countries. One is Kazakhstan, followed by Russia, and after Russia, Turkmenistan is also sharing its border with Caspian Sea, and after Turkmenistan, Iran and Azerbaijan, right? So Azerbaijan is also sharing its borders with the Caspian Sea. So these are the 5 countries with which Caspian Sea shares its borders. Now today also have another very important practice question, and also remember that this question or about the pushpak I have explained in yesterday's lecture. So pushpak recently seen in news is related to which of the following? Option A, surface to air anti-ballistic missile developed by the Defense Research and Development Organization. Option B, a winged vehicle of ISRO, reusable launch vehicle landing experiment. Option B. And option C says that a hypersonic missile launched into space to counter asteroid approaching the Earth. And option D, a spacecraft that moves along a comet with same speed and places a probe on its orbit. Right, so these are 4 options, and try to answer this question in the comment section, and I'll be providing the correct answer in tomorrow's lecture. Now without any delay, let's start our discussion regarding the important news articles. Now first and foremost important article is that recently Srinagar recognized as a Worldcraft City. Now remember, these type of questions are very often asked in UPSC examination, and in 2024 also UPSC asked such questions. Intangible cultural heritage list questions were asked by the UPSC, and therefore it is very important that we have to have a basic understanding about these cities. Okay, so what exactly is this Worldcraft City, and who recognizes Jaipur, Srinagar, Jaipur, Mysore, and other even Mamallapuram has also included in this Worldcraft City. We'll try to understand this in a detailed manner. So recently, Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir, Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, has earned a global acclaim as the fourth Indian city to be designated as a Worldcraft City. And in fact, the Worldcraft City status is provided or given by Worldcraft Council, and this Worldcraft Council is affiliated by the UNESCO, right? So the Worldcraft City affiliation or recognition or designation given by the Worldcraft Council, and recently Srinagar has included in the Worldcraft City, and Srinagar is the fourth Indian city to get the designation of Worldcraft City by the Worldcraft Council. And in fact, this is considered as one of the prestigious recognition for Indian city. The Worldcraft City status is considered as a prestigious recognition for any Indian city. And in fact, Srinagar also joined a UNESCO's Creative City Network for its rich traditions in craft and folk arts. And in fact, Srinagar is also recognized as UNESCO's Creative City Network for having rich craft and folk arts. Now, when you look into the craft forms which are thriving and which are more popular in Srinagar, the recent recognition by the Worldcraft Council, or this is being recognized as a craft city, highlighting that Srinagar's diverse array of traditional crafts. Now we will understand, we will look into those traditional crafts that were very popular and famous in Srinagar. And therefore, the diverse array of crafts in Srinagar contribute immensely for its cultural identity and also local economy, because it is the source of livelihood for the people, right? So there is no doubt about that. It is a source of livelihood for the people. And because of that reason, the crafts and art in Jammu and Kashmir and in Srinagar is a source of local economy, and it is also significantly enhances its cultural identity as a major center of crafts and art forms. And in fact, there are some prominent craft forms in Srinagar and its suburbs. Now these are the famous craft forms from Srinagar. First, papier mache. So this papier mache is an intricate art form that creates a decorative objects using paper pulp and painted motifs. So that is papier mache. And apart from that, there is also another craft form, so that is walnut food carvings. So this walnut food carving is an exquisite woodwork, and that is also known for its detailed carvings and traditional designs also. So it actually have a traditional designs along with the detailed carving. And Srinagar is also famous for carpet weaving, carpet manufacturing, and these carpets are very often hand knotted. So they are hand knotted carpets, and they are well known for their intricate patterns which are designed in these carpets, and it is also known for the rich craftsmanship. And after that, the Sujni embroidery is also very famous from Srinagar. And this Sujni embroidery actually involves fine needlework, and it also characterizes a delicate thread which is being embroidered often on fabrics like silk and wool. And next, very important and very famous, Pashmina and Kani shawls from Srinagar. So these are luxurious textiles which are woven from the fine Pashmina wool, and it is adorned with intricate Kani weaving patterns. And these are different craft forms which are very famous from Srinagar. Now we'll understand what is this Worldcraft City designation, which is given by Worldcraft Council. Now Worldcraft City designation or Worldcraft City initiative is launched by this Worldcraft Council in the year 2014, right? So in the year 2014, the Worldcraft City initiative was launched by Worldcraft Council. Now, what is the aim and what is the objective of Worldcraft Council initiative? So it aims to recognize the cultural, economic and social contributions of local crafts across the world, right? So it wanted to, or it aims to identify the cultural, economic and social contributions of these rich craft forms across different parts of India. Initially, I have mentioned that this Srinagar is the fourth city to be recognized as part of this Worldcraft Council's World City Craft Cities initiative. What are the other cities? So as of now, India has 4 cities to recognized under Worldcraft Cities initiative, and it is a prestigious designation including Jaipur, Mysore, Mamallapuram and now Srinagar. So all these cities are included in the Worldcraft City network. And in fact, when we talk about Jaipur, so Jaipur is very famous for Kundan Jadai, so that is a gem stone setting, and Meenakari jewelry, lace based craft and Gottapatti work. So for all these crafts, Jaipur is very famous, and because of that reason, Jaipur is included in the Worldcraft City network. Followed by that, Mysuru is also included in this Worldcraft City network, and Mysuru is famous for Kinnal paintings, sandalwood carvings and rosewood inlay. And again, Mamallapuram. So Mamallapuram is very famous from ancient times onwards, and especially the stone carvings of Mamallapuram are very famous from the Pallava dynasty onwards. Now Srinagar is also included in this Worldcraft City initiative, Worldcraft City network, as the 4th Indian city for its rich crafts and art forms. And what is this Worldcraft Council? Now when we look into this Worldcraft Council, so it is known as WCC. It is an international organization and it was established in the year 1964. Worldcraft Council was established in the year 1964 and it is an international organization. Now, who are the founders of this Worldcraft Council? The founders are Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay and Eileen Osborne Webb. So these two are the founders of the Worldcraft Council, and this Worldcraft Council operates as a non-profit, non-governmental organization, and it is registered in Belgium, right? So it is an European country, and in fact Worldcraft Council is affiliated with the UNESCO, and in fact it is organized into 5 regional branches, so to foster global fellowship and craft persons and promoting economic development through craft related activities. So for all these reasons, Worldcraft Council is in news, and Srinagar is in news because it is included in this Worldcraft Council's Worldcraft City. Okay, the next important article is Nicobar Triangle. Now the government has planned a Great Nicobar infrastructure development project worth 72,000 crore. It worth 72,000 crore. However, with respect to the Great Nicobar infrastructure development program, it has a number of issues. For example, it is ecologically pristine and sensitive area, ecologically sensitive area. So therefore, a large-scale project like the Great Nicobar Infrastructure Development Project could actually destroy existing environment in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and threatens biodiversity in this area. So that is also crucial here. And after that, there were number of tribals who are living in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. For example, Shompen tribe, were living, right? Onges, Andamanis, and Jarevas. So these were some of the important tribal people who were living in this Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and therefore constructing such a large scale project without having a comprehensive environmental impact assessment. If it is lacking, that will lead to the displacement of all these vulnerable tribal groups, the first thing. And second thing is that it will lead to the damage and destruction of existing environment and ecosystem in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, right? Because Andaman and Nicobar Islands are ecologically sensitive group of islands, and such large scale projects could destroy the environment, and they can also threaten the existing biodiversity of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And in fact, when we talk about Andaman and Nicobar Islands, so they are one of the rich biodiverse regions. Andaman and Nicobar Islands are rich biodiverse regions. So therefore, it is a cause of concern without having a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, or without assessing the damages which are being caused to the environment, we cannot go ahead with this particular project, right? So this is the issue, and we will try to understand this in a much detailed manner. So recently, Union Tribal Affairs Ministry has been reviewing a forest clearance paperwork, right? So there was a paperwork with respect to forest clearance in Andaman and Nicobar Islands for a 72,000 crore infrastructure development project in Great Nicobar Island. And therefore, it has been highlighting some of the challenges with respect to execution of such large-scale projects in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So such challenges are balancing infrastructure development, biodiversity conservation, and indigenous rights. Now, whenever we are executing such a large-scale projects in environmentally fragile and pristine ecosystems, no doubt that it enhances infrastructure, but at the same time it also comes with the biodiversity loss, and even it impacts or displaces the indigenous people who are living in those pristine ecosystems. However, here the need of the hour is balancing the infrastructure development requirements along with biodiversity conservation and indigenous needs or indigenous rights. Now, when we look into the Great Nicobar Infrastructure Development Project, there are a set or series of environmental concerns that are involved. Now, what are the components of this infrastructure development project? So the components of this Great Nicobar Infrastructure Development Project include, firstly, there will be a transshipment port that will be developed, and along with this transshipment port, there will be an international airport and township development in this Great Nicobar Islands, and a 450 MVA power plant over 130 square kilometers of these pristine forests. And these are the major components of the Great Nicobar Infrastructure Development Project. Right, so you can imagine that the kind of negative impact it could have on the existing environment and indigenous group of people, because it is a large scale project and the government has been planning to execute the project as early as possible. However, recently there was a controversy regarding the environmental clearance in this Great Nicobar Islands for this particular project. And in fact, when we look into the previous environmental clearance approvals, it has also received stage 1 environmental clearance. So despite there are a lot of concerns with respect to the environmental conservation and damage to the environment and threatening biodiversity, displacing indigenous people, it has already received the stage 1 environmental clearance. Right, so in fact it is expected that, or the environmental experts have been warning that if the government go ahead with this project, without proper assessment of the impact of such project on the environment, it could impact the Galathea Bay's biodiversity. Now Galathea Bay's biodiversity or Galathea Bay is a very important and a very sensitive region in terms of the biodiversity in the Great Nicobar Islands. And in fact, execution of this project could also significantly impact the sustenance or the survival of species like leatherback turtles in these Andaman and Nicobar Islands. However, so even though there were plans for the compensatory afforestation, for example, what does it compensatory afforestation mandates? So compensatory afforestation means, imagine that there is a piece of land, and in this particular piece of land there is an infrastructure project, so that is planned and executed, and that lead to the deforestation or clearing of the forest in this particular area, right? Clearing of forest in this particular area. Now since forests are cleared in this area, somewhere else the same amount of land is being identified and afforestation activities would be undertaken, right? For example, here 100 square kilometers of land is utilized for constructing or building the infrastructure. However, another area, a same 100 square kilometers of area is identified and afforestation activity would be undertaken, and this is known as the compensatory afforestation. However, in the case of Great Nicobar infrastructure development project, afforestation or compensatory afforestation is not enough, and it has generated a lot of criticism due to the ecological damage that actually cause, the ecological damage to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and rainforest ecosystem, because you cannot ensure that through afforestation whatever damages you have already caused to the existing ecosystem cannot be restored. So that is the key concern here. However, we should not forget the strategic importance of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the need for the development of such large-scale projects in the Nicobar Islands. So why? Because if you carefully look into the map of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, it is a strategic position, because the Nicobar Island actually placed, the Great Nicobar Island actually placed just 90 kilometers from a very strategically important Malacca Strait. And in fact, this Malacca Strait is also known as one of the choke point, because a majority of the shipping oil containers passes through the Malacca Strait. And Malacca Strait is also very important for India, particularly in the context of growing Chinese interference or growing Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region. So therefore, this Great Nicobar Island is located just 90 kilometers from the Malacca Strait, and this particular project essentially aimed to leverage Great Nicobar's strategic location, and it also wanted to further enhance the maritime trade routes. And that is how we can be able to play a very important role here. And after that, experts have also claiming that tourism as a motive for the development. Tourism is the reason for the development of such large-scale infrastructure projects in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, because it is said that rather than a strategic interest, the strategic interests are also involved, but rather than the strategic interests, so the infrastructure development, the large-scale projects which are built in the Great Nicobar Islands are primarily driven with the motive of attracting more and more tourists to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and giving more push to the tourism economy in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And after that, the problem is that there is lack of secrecy and transparency in the execution of this project. And despite there are environmental clearance and appraisal process, so they have actually kept confidential. Both the environmental clearance details and appraisal details or appraisal processes were not made public, and they were kept confidential, and because of that reason we can say that there is a lot of secrecy and there is lack of transparency. in the execution of such projects. And therefore it has been raising a lot of concerns because there is lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and secrecy is being maintained. Because of that reason, it raising the transparency issues amidst the environmental and the tribal rights scrutiny that has been taking place. However, it is not free from the ethical and legal challenges. Now, what kind of an ethical and legal challenges this Great Nicobar Infrastructure Development Project worth of 72,000 crore would face? Now, first and foremost, recently National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, right? So National Commission for Scheduled Tribes raised concerns with respect to the tribal population who are living in this Great Nicobar Islands, okay, especially the Shompen tribe. So according to the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, if such a project is implemented in the Great Nicobar Island, it will lead to the displacement of the Shompen tribe. So it is one of the particularly vulnerable tribe from the Andaman and Nicobar Island, and this issue is not yet resolved, right? How do you rehabilitate the Shompen tribes who are indigenous inhabitants of the Great Nicobar Island? And after that, recently the National Green Tribunal, remember, it was established in the year 2010 through an act of parliament. It looks into the environmental issues, right? So therefore recently the National Green Tribunal's scrutiny, and it also demands for transparency. Remember, we have discussed that there is lack of transparency and secrecy is maintained with respect to the implementation of such a project. And therefore, since there is a lack of transparency in such a large scale projects, it has been highlighting that ensuring transparency and accountability in such a large scale projects, of course, a challenge. However, there is a call for the course correction as well, because there has been a growing demand from the government. There is a growing demand for the government to prioritize transparency in such a large scale projects, governmental sustainability, and respect for the indigenous rights in the project. However, whenever we are implementing such a large scale projects in an environmentally fragile and pristine ecosystems, there is a balance between the indigenous rights, right? So indigenous rights are also very, very important here. Indigenous rights, and apart from indigenous rights, there should be a balance between indigenous rights and also the economic development or infrastructure development and environmental conservation. So the balance between all these things are very, very important. Environmental conservation, so only then we can be able to ensure such projects are sustainable, truly sustainable in nature, because when we execute such projects, there is a balance between indigenous rights, economic development or infrastructure development, and environmental conservation. So this can be ensured through the environmental impact assessment plus stakeholder consultation. Stakeholder consultation and environmental impact assessment are very, very important in this context, right? So we'll proceed on to the next very important article here. The next important article is Panchayat's extension to the Scheduled Areas Act, otherwise called as PISA Act of 1996, right? So Panchayat extension to the Scheduled Areas Act is passed in 1996, right? So through the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, or it has provided for the democratic decentralization. However, with respect to the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, it is largely silent on the self-governance institutions in scheduled areas. So therefore, in order to extend the self-governance institutions to the scheduled areas, the PISA Act was passed in the year 1996, thereby providing more rights to the people living in those areas, providing autonomy for the local bodies, and they are able to take decisions on their own, and they part of the decision making, they part of the governance. So that is the objective of Panchayat extension to the Scheduled Areas Act of 1996. And when we look into the conservation policies, conservation of environment, conservation of ecosystem, biodiversity protection, so everything comes under the conservation policies. And these conservation policies very often they have been facing dual conflicts. Now, what kind of dual conflicts that these conservation policies have been facing? So first and foremost, balancing conservation goals against local communities' extraction needs, right? So whenever we talk about the ecosystem conservation or environmental conservation, now for the purpose of environmental conservation, biodiversity protection, we have established national parks, biosphere reserves, and wildlife sanctuaries, right? So we have established national parks, biosphere reserves, and wildlife sanctuary. Most of the tribal people are inhabitants of either national parks, biosphere reserves, or wildlife sanctuaries. And tribals are also dependent on the minor forest produce that is being derived from the forest areas. And therefore, the conflict here is that balancing the conservation goals, we need to conserve the ecosystem and the environment, and therefore balancing the conservation goals along with the local communities' resource extraction needs. Now, local communities or the tribals very often venture into these protected sites and they collect or they extract the resources. So therefore, how we can balance both? And secondly, reconciling conservation with the imperative of economic development. This is another issue because most of the mines are located inside these conservation and protected areas, and if we wanted to extract those mines, or if we wanted to build national park, if we wanted to build highways, railways over these national parks, biosphere reserves, now if you don't build such infrastructure development projects, then of course it impacts our economic development, right? So these are the major issues whenever we are looking into the balancing environmental conservation along with environmental economic development and protecting the rights of indigenous communities, right? So the structural mandate of the panchayat under this Panchayat extension to Scheduled Areas Act. Now, what is the structural mandate? Now, this PISA Act of 1996 mandates that the local government councils, like how there is a Gram Sabha and how there is a local body and Sarpanch as the head and ward members are elected from different wards within the village. So there is a government council in each of the panchayat in scheduled areas, and the government councils in scheduled areas to reserve all chairperson positions and at least 50% of seats to the scheduled tribes only. So this is what the PISA Act has been mandating, right? So in such government council, so must reserve all chairperson posts in the a local body, and at least 50% or half of the seats for the scheduled tribes, and this is what has been mandated. However, so this legislative framework, when we talk about this legislative framework, just 1 minute. Right. Sorry. So when we look into this legislative framework, it is actually designed to empower the marginalized communities by giving them a direct say in the local governance and even the resource management. Now, whenever they are making any decision with respect to the resource management, and whenever identifying the beneficiaries, and whenever identifying the people who have the rights over the minor forest produce, so everything is decided by the local body, and that power is being given to the panchayat extension, given to the local bodies under this PISA Act of 1996. Now, how it is being implemented in India? We all knew that the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act in the year 1993 has provided for the local self-governance institutions in rural areas. However, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act would not be applicable for the scheduled areas. I think it is clear for all of you, right? So this 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act would not be applicable for the scheduled areas. However, the PISA Act ensures mandated representation for all scheduled tribes in decision-making bodies. So there will be a mandated representation that you can see here. So this is the kind of a representation that is being provided for the scheduled tribes in the decision-making bodies. And in fact, when we look into the implementation of Panchayat extension to scheduled areas across various states, it actually pointing out towards different challenges while implementation and successes in translating this legislative intent. Here the legislative intent is PISA Act of 1996, and it has been highlighting that there are number of challenges and successes in transforming this legislative intent into an effective governance structures. Right? So how the PISA Act ensures equitable representation across the people who are living in these sensitive areas. And apart from that, we should also understand how PISA Act has led to the conservation of the forest ecosystems. Now, in fact, the findings from a report have been indicating that the areas with mandated scheduled tribe representation in the local bodies under the PISA Act actually experiences a lower rate of deforestation, right? For example, so when you look into two areas, when you compare two areas, so these are two local bodies. And local body A, so there is a mandated representation of ST population and there is a lesser representation of ST in another local body. So under this PISA Act, it has mandated that all the chairperson posts and at least 50% of the posts must be reserved for the scheduled tribe population under this PISA Act. And whenever this PISA Act is followed in letter and spirit in that particular local body, the forest deforestation is just around 10%. But on the other hand, there are other local bodies where this mandated reservation is not followed, where the deforestation is much higher. It is around 25%. So there is a stark contrast between the areas where there is a higher representation of scheduled tribe population and there is a lower representation of scheduled tribe population in the local bodies. And this has been pointing out towards the fact that scheduled tribe population have been intricately connected their lives with the forest, and in fact they play a very important role in forest conservation and undertaking the afforestation drives. However, there are also certain economic incentives for the conservation as well. And in fact, we all knew that the scheduled tribe communities, they're very often dependent on forest resources for their livelihoods. And they are also very often incentivized to protect forest cover under this PISA Act. So no doubt that whenever we talk about the scheduled tribe population, and most of the scheduled tribe population live around the fringes of these sensitive and protected areas, and they actually take part in the protection and conservation of the environment and ecosystem. So therefore, this particular forest stewardship from the scheduled tribe population emerges as STs engage in sustainable practices, and they also resist the deforestation pressures driven by mining and commercial interests. And due to the mining, deforestation has been taking place. Illegal mining, illegal encroachment, deforestation in these sensitive areas has been taking place. But here scheduled tribe population actually play a very important role in withstanding pressures of the environmental degradation, or withstanding the resistance, or withstanding the pressure from mining mafia and even the commercial interests who have been grabbing or encroaching the forest land, right? So however, when we talk about the democratic decentralization with respect to the these forest areas, so the report has also highlighted, or it has distinguished between the administrative decentralization that focuses on efficiency and democratic decentralization, right? So there is a difference. It makes a distinctions between administrative decentralization and democratic decentralization. And in fact, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act has been emphasizing on democratic decentralization. It has been emphasizing on democratic decentralization, right? So therefore, this democratic decentralization actually emphasizes on representative and accountable local governance structures. And they have the decision making autonomy over the resource management, and therefore the PISA Act has been ensuring that the resources are well managed because of the representation of scheduled tribe population in the decision making bodies, and that has been led to the democratic decentralization, greater participation and devolution of greater powers to the local bodies which were established under the PISA Act. However, it is recommended that there is a need to create a single umbrella institution, right? So when we have a single and empowered institution that could essentially integrates both conservation and developmental activities. And after that, the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act also serves as one of the best example of how legislative mandates for political representation can drive positive environmental outcomes while addressing the socio-economic disparities among the forest dwelling communities in India. Now, next article is about the Finance Commission and Indian cities. So what is the role of the Finance Commission? Now we all knew that this Finance Commission is established under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, and it is also a constitutional body. And Finance Commission is constituted every 5 years by the President, right? So it is a constitutional body and it is constituted once in every 5 years. Now when we look into this, the context is that new 18th Lok Sabha has been constituted, NDA government has formed, NDA coalition has formed the government. So therefore, the 16th Finance Commission can actually drive a substantive public finance reforms for Indian cities. Now what kind of substantive public finance reforms it can give for Indian cities, we will understand that in a little detailed manner, right? Now when we look into this, 16th Finance Commission can actually catalyze the municipal level financial reforms. How it can catalyze the municipal level financial reforms is that now under Article 243I, it talks about the Finance Commission. Now state governments also constitute Finance Commission once in every 5 years, right? Governor of a state constitute Finance Commission once in every 5 years. However, the problem in the states is that state governments are not regularly constituting the Finance Commission, and in fact these Finance Commission at the state level also make recommendations on a devolution of net proceeds of taxes between the local bodies and the state government, right? But the problem here is that the state governments have not been regularly constituting the Finance Commission to decide devolution of funds to the local bodies, and therefore the 16th Finance Commission should emphasize that there is a need for the state government to constitute these Finance Commission on regular basis, and at the same time these Finance Commissions should be provided with adequate resources and ensure that whatever recommendations are provided to the government, those recommendations must be taken seriously by the respective state governments. And apart from that, the 16th Finance Commission should also recommend a formula based approach, right? So there should be a formula based approach for ensuring a predictable fiscal transfers from the state governments to the municipalities. The problem is that even though state governments have been constituting these finance commissions, so there is no predictable or consolidated fiscal transfers from the state to the local bodies. Now in this context, the 16th Finance Commission should make a formula based approach. There should be a formula based approach for the consolidated and predictable fiscal transfer from the state to the municipalities. And apart from that, there is a need for the revenue optimization as well, right? So when we talk about this revenue optimization, the 16th Finance Commission should actually incentivize the municipalities to enhance their own revenues. And in fact, the municipal bodies across India have a lot of potential to generate their own resources. However, the problem is that they have a poor capacity with respect to raising their own revenues to meet the regular expenditure. They very often dependent on central grants or the state government transfers, and because of that reason there is a poor performance on the part of these municipal bodies. So therefore, in this context, the 16th Finance Commission should incentivize these municipalities to raise their own revenues by undertaking certain reforms in the property tax collection, user charges, leveraging the existing land assets, right? So when they are able to generate their own resources or revenues, their dependence on central government and state government can be substantially reduced, and this will lead to the faster development or a resilient development of these urban centers. However, there is a fiscal responsibility and budget management is also the need of the hour with respect to these municipal bodies. The 16th Finance Commission, when we talk about the 16th Finance Commission, it can actually incentivize the municipalities or the urban local bodies to adopt this fiscal responsibility and budget management frameworks. So when they have this fiscal responsibility and budget management frameworks in place, it actually accelerate the municipal borrowings, and these municipal borrowings will give a push for the infrastructure development in those areas. And therefore, this will enable the cities to access capital markets for financing their own infrastructure development needs. And apart from that, there is a need for increased transparency and a citizen participation. And this is also very, very important, because transparency and citizen participation will ensure the sustainability, and at the same time regularly taking into consideration the stakeholder feedback in the development of these urban bodies will play a very important role in the long run. However, there is a need for the reforms that have to be undertaken. So no doubt that Indian cities have been facing numerous challenges because of the financial shortfalls. And in fact, even if these urban local bodies have the finances, so they have been struggling to utilize funds in a much more efficient manner. So that is also another problem, and this has been leading to the underdevelopment of infrastructure and services in these urban areas. And therefore, cities actually need a predictable fiscal transfers, and for the predictable fiscal transfers, the 16th Finance Commission can actually provide a formula based devolution of funds from the state governments to the respective local bodies, right? So these predictable fiscal transfers will ensure effective planning. But the problem here is that state governments very often delaying constituting the state finance commissions, and they are not implementing their recommendations, and this is also another problem. Now, whenever cities underutilize the existing revenue generating powers due to the outdated valuation process and mostly it is being controlled by the state governments, and therefore there is a need for comprehensive reforms that are needed at all stages of revenue collection. And apart from that, there is also a need for transparency and fiscal responsibility in this context. Okay, so the legal framework for financial accounting, reporting, budgeting is inconsistent across different states, and therefore in this context we need to have a standardized format, mandatory accounting standards, and management accounting systems, so they improve overall transparency and the fiscal responsibility as well. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So please try to subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.